welcome to this Season 12, Episode 7 of your favourite Ubuntu-based podcast with a little bit of Linux and a sprinkle of open source. Today it's Monday the 20th of May. We're going to be rounding up the community news and events and some news headlines, and joining me are Alan.
Hello there.
Hello, and Mark.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So, Alan, what have you been up to recently?
I have been a nice father and bought my son a replacement new phone for his aging OnePlus One.
So you bought him a top-of-the-range OnePlus 5T X, whatever they're called these days?
7 Pro.
No, I bought him another OnePlus One. Because the one he had was the 16 gig base model, the one that I bought off of the internet's Joe Ressington some time ago, and he's been complaining that it's run out of space, and he's got like no apps on it. You open up the app drawer and there's 2 apps.
Oh,
like one of them is YouTube, and there's maybe WhatsApp, and that's it. But there's pretty much nothing on it. And every time he takes a photo, the camera app crashes because it runs out of space. So he's been complaining, and I found one on eBay pretty cheap, 64 gig. So yeah.
Ah, right. So 4 times the storage.
Yeah, and he's way happy because he can actually install games and stuff on there now and take photos.
And so what's running on it?
Lineage 16, which I think equates to latest Android, maybe.
Yep, Android P, I believe.
Right.
And he seems to like that. It works okay. Every so often he comes in and shows me the phone and he goes, "Look, I've got this game on there." I'm like, well done for consuming some more disk space on that phone. But it's a testament to that phone that however many years after it came out, it's still a really good, really robust, really useful phone running the latest version of Android. It's a great device. I love it.
Yeah, it must be 6... Is it 6 years old?
I don't know. It's quite old though.
Well, the OnePlus 7's just come out and they skipped 4, so...
But some years they do 2.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. That's why I don't know. I don't really track it. But yeah, happy.
Yeah, mine's still going.
You still use yours as well?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So, Mark, what have you been up to with your phone this week?
Well, there's something I haven't been doing this week, and that is migrating my Mastodon account to ubuntu.social.
Why have you not been migrating your account to the mighty ubuntu.social?
Well, some guy on the internet set up ubuntu.social
Hello.
about a month or so ago, and I wasn't sure at the time whether this was just something which was done as a bit of an experiment or whether this was going to be a sort of long, permanent thing like Ubuntu instance of Mastodon for the internet going forwards. So I thought I'll wait a bit and see what happens with it, and if Alan is planning on keeping it up to date and sustainably funded and so on, or whether it might disappear at some point unannounced and I'll have to migrate back to another instance, which I don't really feel like I want to be a Mastodon nomad. I'd rather just pick a home that seems relevant and stay there.
Right.
So Alan, while I've got you here.
Yeah. So it might help to add context to say that it was set up in a bit of a hurry in a pub one night when one of our loyal listeners and denizen of our Telegram channel said, "Hey, wouldn't it be good if we had a Mastodon account and a Mastodon instance?" And I thought, yeah, that would be really cool. And I looked for domain names, and ubuntu.social was available. So I thought, yep, I'll have that. So then I followed some instructions and installed Mastodon. I was like, there you go. And in fact, it was quite funny because he saw that I'd registered the domain and he jumped on there. He's actually user number 1 on that instance. Before me, I registered, and as soon as I registered, it said, "You are user number 2. I was like, "Hey, what? How?" And he'd just been sat there pressing F5 until the instance came up and then joined. So, yeah, it's not sustainable. As in, at the moment, I've got a thing on there that says if you want to throw a few quid towards me for PayPal or using Ko-Fi or something like that, and if people want to do that, that'd be great, and that would help offset the cost, because actually I'm paying for it out of my own pocket.
Right, yes.
It's not something that is company sponsored. It's not an Ubuntu thing. I don't know how long it will last. It's a bit of an experiment, but if it can be sustainable, then that would be great.
Would you encourage our listeners to join or migrate their accounts to it?
They can do if they want to. It's currently, registrations are currently switched off because I don't want a massive flood of like thousands of people on there and the box break. But if people ping me, I can open it up and they can register. That's not a problem. And that's what I've done for most people. There's not a huge number of people on it, to be honest. I had to upgrade it last weekend because I hadn't upgraded and I hadn't taken care of it very well. So I've improved that and I've upgraded it to the latest version of Mastodon, and I've added some more admin tools. So it's it doesn't run out of disk space now, which it did.
Well, that's good.
Oh, and also the you might not want to sign up given that the SSL cert expired a couple of weeks ago because I didn't set up the Let's Encrypt cron job properly. So yeah, no, don't.
So Mark, how's your confidence levels?
I'll wait and see for a bit longer.
Wise words.
Okay, let's move on. So now it's time for some community news and events. Alan, what have you got?
So first up, the Kubuntu team have a Plasma 5.16 beta available for testing.
What's a Plasma 5.16?
So you know how everyone calls it KDE?
Yes.
Well, that's not really the name of the desktop. So the desktop is called Plasma Desktop. And the KDE team, the KDE developers, or the Plasma developers, see, I've fallen into the trap already, are very active and have pushed out new versions of Plasma. And the Kubuntu team have made it available as a PPA, so you can add the PPA to your existing installed system, your stable release of Kubuntu, and try out the new stuff. And that makes it a nice, easy way for people to try out the new stuff, and they can roll it back if you don't like it, you can like rip the PPA out and roll back to the good stuff if it's not for you.
Excellent.
One thing I liked about this is, as well as saying, here's how to get it, they've actually got a list of test cases which they'd like people to try out, and then links for where you should report bugs if any of the things that they've asked you to test fail.
Yeah, I like that. I thought that was a very cool idea, because rather than just say, oh, have at it, there's actually some very specific actionable things that people could do to contribute in a positive way to Kubuntu. And also they're very clear that, anything you do to contribute here feeds back to KDE and the Plasma team, and other people will benefit as well. So it's not just Kubuntu that benefits, it's the whole ecosystem around KDE.
I'm making notes furiously here. That sounds like a very wise thing indeed.
It does, doesn't it?
Well done, Kubuntu, for that, yeah.
And they've also got a daily ISO image, so if you want to try a clean install with Plasma 5.16, you can try that either in a VM or on bare metal. Have at it.
And if any of our listeners are wondering what the heck a daily ISO is, email us at show@ubuntu podcast.org and we'll explain a bit more details what that is all about. Mark, what news did you dig up?
Well, the Ubuntu design and web team have published a summary of what they've been up to on their holidays. Not on their holidays, at work for the past 3 months or so.
These are good. I like reading these because this is stuff that has often been like hidden behind closed doors, and you don't hear about it. Just suddenly, there's a new website launched, or slowly some things have moved around on the web, or on some web property that Canonical owns or Ubuntu owns. I think it's really nice that they've detailed all the stuff they've done. Some good stuff in there. Yeah.
And anyone wondering what Mark's little quip is about, there was a Canonical sprint last week in Lyon in France.
Oh, that's where you were.
That's where I was.
Gallivanting again.
Apparently. So what some of the highlights, what have they been up to, the design and web team?
There's a new website for Juju and Juju as a service. So this is the cloud orchestration utility, I'm going to say.
I think they call it's like apt-get for the web or something, don't they? Or for the cloud. I should know that really, shouldn't I? That's the marketing term I've always heard used, is that's what Juju is. Anyway, yes, new website for that.
Yeah, there's some cool new stuff in the Snap Store. So for the categories pages within the Snap Store, they now have more prominent featured apps like the front page does.
Oh, I really like that.
Yes.
If you go to snapcraft.io/store, you can, and scroll down, the most featured thing in a category is like highlighted above the others. It breaks the page up really, really nicely.
And there's some other Snap related stuff for auto generating your first snapcraft.yaml, and there's an interactive YAML viewer built into the web page as well, which is quite nice.
Oh, that's nice.
In fact, there's been a couple of things regarding YAML recently. So Sergio presented a lightning talk last week, and this is based off work that Dan Llewellyn has done. So now if you install the YAML extension in Visual Studio Code, you can now do Snapcraft YAML validation and autocomplete and stuff like that. And if you're using any of the JetBrains products, that's all just built in by default.
Nice. Another thing I spotted, which piqued my interest, was that there's been some branding changes, including a new logo for the Ubuntu Security Podcast.
Outrage.
But it's really cool. It's like a microphone padlock mashup.
It's quite clever.
Yeah, it's quite pretty. Yeah, I guess they, I don't know whether they asked for an update or someone on the web team was offended by the icon that they'd thrown together and decided, look, that won't do. We'll create a new one for you. Nobody's contacted us yet. That's fine.
We need to make a really bad one. It's like when people draw rude things around potholes in the road to get them fixed quicker.
Right. Yeah, that would really help. That would be a good idea.
I wonder if Alex Murray and Joe McManus have just stolen a march on us and hogged the design team.
What else have they done? There's been some new landing pages. There's been a whole new website about Canonical's AI consulting services with a nice sort of step through and lots of nice diagrams and stuff. And a new website for Ubuntu Advantage, because I think if you watched Mark Shuttleworth's interview that we spoke about last show, there's been some changes to Ubuntu Advantage and how it's packaged for different people, or more sort of coherently packaged for everyone is probably a better way of describing it. So there's a new website for that.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's next, Martin?
Well, Ubuntu MATE have posted some details about the early developments for 1910.
Who? So what 1910 is the Aeon what?
Aeon, yeah. Aeon Ermine.
Okay. We'll gloss over that. What's new or what's coming in 1910?
We've collectively agreed that the correct pronunciation of Aeon is 1910.
Pronunciation, surely.
Yeah, I wasn't going to pick up on that, but okay.
That was deliberate. Never mind.
Okay. So what have you got?
Well, we've got some new team members. We've got some new guys joining the QA team, new developer, and a new guy who's joined the merch team. In fact, somebody that I met at Linux Fest Northwest.
Oh, nice. Is that to design new T-shirts and stuff and thing?
Well, initially to get some stickers put together so that we can create stickers to take to events and stuff to hand out to people. Mm-hmm. Can't find anywhere where we can flog stickers, but we would like to make some to give away. Right. But yes, then eventually things like, T-shirts and mugs and maybe something interesting, if we can think of something interesting. We've had a content refresh in the software boutiques. There's a whole bunch of new stuff in there and some updates along the way as well. We started work on a new Ubuntu MATE welcome, so a whole new redesign on that. And then we fixed a whole load of stuff, load of theme fixes. All of the big crashes in Ubuntu MATE have been fixed already.
All of them?
Yes, all the big ones. All the ones that make errors.ubuntu.com put its sad face on. Right. So, good. Yes, we've fixed those ones. And we've upgraded to MATE 122.1.
And I see there's an update to one of the selected apps that you're shipping by default.
This is true.
What's that then?
We have decided to drop Thunderbird as the default email client and migrate to Evolution.
Wow.
And I think when I mentioned this the other day, when you talked about this, I said, what? Your response was, well, have you tried Evolution recently? And the answer is no. No, I haven't. So apparently it's better.
Yes, it integrates with the desktop way, way better. And one of the other changes that we've made in 1910 is we're using the date time indicator that users of Unity 7 will be familiar with. and that has integration with the Evolution data services. So when you click on that now, you can see your upcoming calendar events, and you can click on the dates in the calendar and see what's in your schedules, and gives you nice notifications about what's going on and stuff like that.
Nice.
Mark, what else have you spotted in the community news?
Well, there's been an announcement of the first Ubuntu Flavors meeting to discuss collective plans for 1910. Now, I seem to remember, Martin, you mentioning recently that there's been a lot more collaboration and sharing of ideas between the various flavors. Is this something that you've been involved in?
A little bit. This is mostly being spearheaded by Simon Quigley, who represents predominantly Ubuntu. And it's an idea that I had kicking around at the back of my mind for ages, and I mentioned to Simon some time ago, and he said, that sounds like a good idea. And then I think off the back of Linux Fest Northwest, when most of the flavours were there, and we had some really good discussions, I think that was a catalyst of enthusiasm to actually turn this idea into a thing. So Simon has done all of the administration and sheep herding to make this happen, and we're having this chat this week, sometime this week, one evening this week. It's in my calendar somewhere. Hang on a minute, I'll look in my date time indicator. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that, and we'll see where that takes us. So all going to share our plans for 1910, and I suspect this might be the first of many of these. Yeah, looking forward to it. Alan, what else have you seen?
Peppermint OS have put out a new release, number 10. It's based on Ubuntu 18.04 with updated hardware enablement stack. So it's not an official flavor, it's a derivative, but I thought it was worthy of a mention because it's been around for quite a while, and there's a few people in the community who I know really enjoy using it because it's quite lightweight.
Yeah, I hear positive things about Peppermint OS. It's usually where I lose all the Ubuntu MATE users to.
I remember I tested this out many years ago, a long time ago, when it was originally run by a couple of guys from America, and it was all focused. It was around the time of netbooks, so it was a very long time ago. And it was all focused around site-specific browsers, basically web apps, like individual browsers for each of the web properties. They had a vision that every application would be delivered via the web, and they just provide a lightweight desktop and all the apps would be web apps, which they weren't far wrong to suggest that, because most of the things I use on a daily basis are on the web. A bit ahead of their time, really. But now it's run by a guy called Mark, who lives in Cornwall, I think.
Good name.
Yes. And it seems pretty popular, so might be worth having a look at that.
I think that site-specific browser stuff is still their USP, isn't it?
Yes, that's still the main thing.
We've had that on our "we should steal this from another distro" list in Ubuntu MATE for some years, but never quite got round to it.
Well, it's something that lots of people have sort of done a bit of and then dropped in various fashions, and it's always disappointed me because it's nice to have something like that to give you that crossover for something you use a lot that's a website.
I really wish Firefox did it properly. I used to use it quite a bit in Chrome because I quite like just using my desktop's Alt-Tab feature. I don't like the fact that I have to Alt-Tab, then within the application switch tabs to go to a different website. I like the fact I can Alt-Tab to Twitter and then Alt-Tab to Google+, rest its soul. But that it's not something that's easy to do. I don't know if the thing that Peppermint has is easy to install on stock Ubuntu. Maybe it is. I don't know.
And it sounds like it's not tied to a specific browser either, which is interesting. It can use different ones.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a nifty bit of kit. And finally, Canonical announced support for Ubuntu on WSL2, which Microsoft announced earlier this week, or was it last week? It's also confusing now.
We spoke about it last time.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about it much this episode because we're going to talk about that as a segment in our next episode. So tune in for that. And we have one event this week. It's UbuCon Europe 2019, which will be taking place from the 10th to the 13th of October in Sintra, Portugal. I hope I've pronounced that correctly.
Yes, it is pronounced Portugal. Yes.
Ah.
But this announcement is for their call for papers. So if you are planning to go to UbuCon Europe and you want to present, then please head to the link in our show notes and fill out the call for papers. The call for papers is open until June the 30th, so we've got well over a month to get your submissions in. And that is all for the community news and events. And now we have our favourite picks from the news headlines this week. And I noticed that Google is going to stop doing business with Huawei.
Well,
Is this because Huawei are evil spies?
They would probably assert not.
there was some sort of deliberately vague executive order issued by Donald Trump, wasn't there, about how American companies mustn't use telecommunications equipment from unnamed companies that might be a threat to national security. And this seems to be fallout from that.
Whenever there's an order or a decision within America that says you can't trade with a particular country like Syria or Iran or any other, selected country that they've decided you shouldn't be able to trade with, it makes it very difficult for American corporations to then, deal with those companies in any way. And this is, definitely the fallout from that. So it's weird because, it really puts Huawei in a really sticky position.
It also puts Google in a sticky position too.
Well, I don't know. Well, for Huawei, they can no longer, from this point onwards, can't ship devices that have the proprietary Google stuff in. So they can't have Google certified apps like the Play Store and YouTube and Gmail and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And Google, I guess, lose the revenue from the second biggest phone handset manufacturer in the world and all those devices. So I guess it does impact them.
Yeah, that was my point. I think I may be wrong about this, but I think I read that Huawei is now the number one handset manufacturer for Android devices.
Wow.
Larger than Samsung. Maybe I've got that inverted, but certainly they're significant. And, that's a technology partner or customer that Google/Android will be losing.
So people have speculated that they could possibly get away with just running AOSP or switch to something else, as if there is a ready-made, off-the-shelf other operating system that you could put in stores that people would actually buy. And I don't think that's really the case, is it?
I don't think so. I mean, AOSP is very bare bones. You only have to install Lineage without the GApps add-ons, which is kind of a hooky side load of the Play services, which of course Huawei are now prohibited from using. It's a pretty trim experience. I don't know if Huawei ship the Play Store stuff in Chinese territories, or if that's just for Western markets.
Well, they have their own apps. They have their own branded Huawei apps, their own photo app, their own calendar app. So they do have a set of apps that they ship in China because they don't ship all of the Google stuff in China because most of it doesn't work because it's blocked. So they could ship that same stuff outside China, but would everyone want to use that, or would they really actually want their Gmail and their YouTube and their calendar and all that?
Tricky. So is this going to affect I think Huawei are unveiling a whole bunch of new handsets this week in London. Does this mean that their new phones are basically dead on arrival?
Well, it sounded like because of the way that Android device certification works, if their existing handsets are already verified, then Google won't actually have to deal with Huawei for them to continue to work and have the experience that you would expect to have with them, but it's future handsets that might be impacted.
So this isn't a retroactive policy?
It doesn't sound like it.
It feels like it might affect the capability for them to be upgraded, though.
Possibly, yes.
Like if you bought a device today, chances are you won't get Android Q or whatever the next letter after that, I should know. But
And also, you should know the alphabet.
yes.
Also, the way that Android security patches work is that they're shared privately by Google before they make their way into AOSP. And so Huawei wouldn't get that private sharing anymore. They'd have to wait for the patches and the vulnerabilities to become public and then hurry to do an update to fix the holes.
I think it's fair to say there isn't an Android handset manufacturer on the planet that hurries to ship the security patches on any of their devices. Right, Alan.
So this isn't so much a news article as just something that I found fascinating, and it's a story spread across 4 blog posts of some enthusiasts who bought an old IBM mainframe on an auction website and then went to go and get it.
As you do.
It doesn't sound super interesting because you think, well, just drive over there and pick it up. But it turns out there was an awful lot of equipment, very heavy, wired in under the floor, like a data center would be. And the building parts of the building had almost been built around the computer. So you couldn't actually get it out of the building. And they had to take the door off the building to get the computer back out again. It's just a lovely, fascinating story.
What model of mainframe was this?
So this is an IBM 360, did I say?
360 Model 20.
Model 20, but there was more than just the computer. There's lots of other bits and bobs and storage and printer and tape drives and tapes and all the ancillary stuff that goes with it and power supplies. And some of the equipment is like significantly sized, and you need a decently sized van or truck to take it away. And it seemed they took multiple trips. I don't want to spoil the entire story, but they did manage to get it all out. And but the story of how they did it, and there's a lot of photos in the articles, but it's really worth a read. It's what lightened my mood was the fact that there are people who are willing to dedicate, thousands of pounds to buy the thing in the first place and store it somewhere new, and then I presume in the future restore it and get it working somehow. They've got some manuals and some engineering books and stuff that came with it. But that people will go out of their way to keep old computers like that running, because I don't imagine there's a lot of those 360 Model 20s running around the world right now.
Is this not the computing equivalent of these guys that buy, restore, and then operate old steam engines and what have you?
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same. It's the steam engine for this generation, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it really is a steam engine.
And people who used to work on the railways, maybe are interested in steam, whereas people who worked in computer data centers like 50 years ago, this is their thing.
Well, it's funny you should say that, actually, because 2 of the guys involved in this do actually work in the railway industry. But they also, all 3 of them are involved in the National Museum of Computing.
That helps.
So I guess it's possible in the future that if they're successful here, you might be able to go and visit these machines there one day.
That'd be amazing.
Well, you can read the full story in the links in the show notes. Mark?
Well, there's been some reports of MongoDB data being held to ransom.
Held to ransom by who?
Oh, well, who knows? There's a group of attackers, or possibly an attacker, that's been identified by the name Unistella, who has been finding public and unsecured MongoDB databases out on the interwebs and deleting all their data, and then leaving a message saying recovery, contact, and an email address.
So it's basically just good old-fashioned blackmail.
So it seems like the data's probably being saved somewhere, or possibly not. Possibly it's all just a massive scam, and people might give them the money, but it doesn't. There's no terms there. It's just an email address, which presumably you have to email, and then they negotiate what they're going to charge you to give you your data back.
It's not a great time to be involved in the MongoDB project at the moment, is it?
Yes, a bit hairy.
This is not the first one of these ransom things. We talked about this a few weeks ago, where Git repositories were being nuked somehow. and people were given, here's a Bitcoin address you got to send some money to, and we'll restore your data. It's pretty horrible. I mean, this has been going on for years, hasn't it? Steal someone's stuff and then hold it to ransom to give it back or not. It's just a lot easier now from a remote location with an anonymous email address to hide when you do it. It's pretty awful.
Something that struck me about these was that the research behind this story was done using the binary edge and showdown directories, which scan stuff that's on the web, and so you can find things like publicly accessible webcams and things where default settings have been left and things aren't secure. And it made me wonder, is part of the reason that this was possible that if you just install MongoDB on a publicly accessible server, then something like this is possible to do? It doesn't have authentication and it's publicly accessible by default. Is that how MongoDB works?
I don't know. I've never touched it. But it is strange that that Showdown database I've seen cited before as a way of discovering vulnerable devices, and this is why we keep banging the drum about not having default passwords and using keys for access and not having services on by default. But all of that is great until someone apt installs or unpacks a tarball and just starts running a daemon. There's only so much you can do until a sysadmin comes along and does something stupid.
Interesting stuff. Well, that's all we have time for in the news this week.
We know you've got a Facebook account, so stop sharing cat photos for a moment and like or share our posts so your friends and family can find the Ubuntu podcast.
Right, that's it. You can all start sobbing. That's the end of episode 7. We'll be back next week when we're going to be talking about WSL2 and the Windows terminal, the new Windows terminal. We'd also like to say thank you to Bitfolk, who provide our VPS. So if you're looking for a fine VPS, head over to bitfolk.com. And thank you very much to Jupiter Broadcasting and Linux Academy for making it possible for Joe and his lackey Drew to edit our shows.